Okay, let's now talk about schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a severe disorder of thought and emotion. Basically, people with schizophrenia lose contact with the reality. They lose sight of what is real and what is not. This disorder is characterized by disturbances in attention, thinking, language, emotion, and relationships. That is, this is an all-encompassing disorder, truly affecting functioning at pretty much every level. Given how devastating it is, it may come as no surprise that greater than half of the population of people who are in mental institutions are suffering from schizophrenia, even though less than 1% of the general population has schizophrenia. What are some of the characteristics of schizophrenia? The first is delusions. It means strongly held beliefs that have no basis in reality. And the delusion is a psychotic symptom. It means it is a psychological problem reflecting serious distortions in reality. Here are some examples of delusion. The patient may believe that man looks exactly like my husband, but he is an impostor. Sometimes patients with schizophrenia think their relatives are imposed by other people. Their relatives are not really their relatives. They may, be kidnapped by aliens, and then aliens act like them. Or have the delusion that I can become a wolf, or I'm actually dead. Another characteristic of schizophrenia is hallucinations. It's sensory perception that occurs in the absence of external stimulus. So most of the hallucinations are auditory. Patients describe that they hearing voices in their head. The voices keep giving them directions, instructions. Actually, patients may be talking to themselves in their head, but mistakenly think that they are hearing the voices, but actually it's just themselves talking. Another characteristic of schizophrenia is disorganized speech. Patients often skip from topic to topic in a disjoint way, maybe due to their impairments in shifting and maintaining attention. Here is an example. They are destroying too many cattle and oil just to make soap. If we need soap, when you can jump into a pool of water and then buy gasoline. So we can see that this patient skip from topic to topic in a very disjoint way. Another characteristic is disorganized behavior. Their self-care and personal hygiene can deteriorate. They may have some inappropriate behaviors like laughing at the wrong time, wearing coat on a hot day, and they may also have catatonic symptoms. It means movement problems, including holding the body in a bizarre posture, curling up in a fetal position, resisting simple suggestions to move. So, what causes schizophrenia? Psychologists provide several explanations. The first is from the family perspective. So, family members don't cause schizophrenia, but patients with schizophrenia can relapse after treatment if family reacts with criticism, hostility, or over-involvement. So, families don't cause schizophrenia, but it can contribute to the relapse of schizophrenia. The second is the biological roots of schizophrenia. Patients show some brain abnormalities. We don't need to go into details about the brain abnormalities, but we only need to know that schizophrenia is a disorder of brain deterioration. Also, there are neurotransmitter differences. There are some abnormalities in dopamine receptors. And we find that schizophrenia also have a strong genetic factor component according to twin studies and adoption studies. Another explanation for schizophrenia is the diathesis stress model. Notice that this model is applicable to any mental disorder, including schizophrenia. It means that a person may have genetic vulnerability to developing a certain disorder, but whether or not they do so depends on environmental stressors. So it is an interaction between your genes and the environment. Diathesis means a predisposition or vulnerability. For example, if you inherited a disposition to develop schizophrenia, and you also suffer from lots of stress when you grow up, for example, like prenatal trauma, childhood sexual or physical abuse, family conflicts, significant life change. So the stronger the diathesis, the stronger your predisposition, the less stress is necessary to produce the disorder. So if you have a strong predisposition, you don't need a lot of stress from the environment to produce this psychological disorder. But in other words, if you have a weak predisposition, you have a small diathesis, then you need lots of stress from the environment to produce a psychological disorder. Okay, last but not least, we will talk about childhood disorders, autism, and ADHD. Let's first talk about autism spectrum disorders. The DSM-5 contends that the symptoms of the autism can best be described as a continuum of severity, rather than in categorical terms, with many children with Asperger disorder being able to function effectively in a school or occupational setting. So it's a spectrum. Individuals with the autism spectrum disorders are marked by persistent deficits in communication, social bonding, and imagination, sometimes accompanied by intellectual impairment. The DSM-5 breaks down the symptoms of autism spectrum disorders into social impairments and repetitive or restrictive behaviors, which can include repetitive speech or movements, resistance to change, and highly specialized and limited interests, and preoccupation with certain foods or unusual objects, such as light bulbs. There has been an increase in prevalence since the early 1990s. It's likely due to relaxed diagnostic criteria. We have all heard about the association between autism spectrum disorder and vaccines, but there is no real relationship between these two things. This is an example of illusory correlations. Babies received these vaccines around the same time as the symptoms appear. So there is no real relationship It just this happened at the same time, so it's an illusory correlation. And also the link between MMR vaccine and autism is repeatedly falsified, and the original research paper has been retracted by the author. Now let's talk about ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. We all have heard about it, and the key symptoms include inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Around 3 to 7% of school children can be diagnosed as having ADHD, and there are more men than women. The ratio is 3 to 1, so it's more prevalent in boys. Unfortunately, ADHD is related to numerous functional problems in both children and adults. So for children, ADHD is associated with inattention, with restlessness, issues with emotion control, learning disabilities, difficulties processing verbal information. And for adults, ADHD is associated with increased risk for accidents and injuries, unemployment, and legal problems. ADHD is highly genetically influenced, and we estimate that its heritability is as high as 0.8. So this is the end of today's lecture about psychological disorders.